testing DNA from artifacts to determine whether celebrated historical figures were poisoned or suffered from genetic diseases are titillating uses for modern genetic technology, but many researchers are calling for stricter guidelines governing such practices. The new science of biohistorical investigation is stimulating ethical concerns for historic figures, living family members, and groups, as well as society in general, because specific standards and guidelines are not in place. Your group represents a professional organization whose members include archaeologists, forensic examiners, sociologists, and museum researchers. You've been asked to make recommendations about social, legal, ethical, and scientific standards for this field. In your presentation, you should A, define biohistorical analysis. B, describe some investigations on historical figures that have yielded interesting results. C, explain social, legal, ethical, and scientific issues raised by biohistorical research. And D, propose professional guidelines and standards for regulating biohistorical research. South?
Yeah.
I am Nina Villanueva, third quarter captain of the Sapon Junior High NAL presentation team. And now I'll let my team introduce themselves.
Reagan McDonald,
Ashley Unick,
Riley Dickamore,
Savannah Ruiz,
Hudson Iverson, co-captain.
Olivia Stevens, Bethany Budd,
Nikki Strini,
Isaiah Brown. As Cicero once said, quote, "Not knowing what happened before we were born is to forever remain a child," close quote. We are a group of professional researchers. Within our group are archaeologists, forensic examiners, sociologists, and museum researchers. Today we will talk to you about biohistorical research. The definition of biohistorical research is the study of history informed by biology. We'll describe investigations and historical figures. Next, we will explain social, legal, ethical, and scientific issues.
I am a forensic examiner, here to tell you what biohistorical analysis is. Biohistorical research is when scientists take something like DNA from a dead person's blood or hair and test it to find answers to fascinating historical questions. Although, as interesting as finding the truth about history can be, scientific, legal, ethical, and social concerns can be raised through bioanalysis. In Mary Shelley's book, Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein's wife asks a very important question. She asks Frankenstein, quote, "My darling, you've been asking yourself if you could, when you should be asking yourself if you should," close quote. We have the technology to do amazing things with biohistorical research, but the issue is, should we be doing it?
I am a museum researcher, and I have found that there are some historical figures that have yielded some interesting results. They are Hitler and Napoleon Bonaparte. You have probably heard of the Hitler suicide story, and when they found the bones, they believed it. But when they did a forensic analysis on it, they found that it was in fact female. Also, they found that Napoleon Bonaparte was in fact murdered. They found a deadly poison in his hair called cyanide.
As an archaeologist, I've been given many opportunities to dig up bones. One of the bones that I've recently dug up is King Richard III's body under a parking lot in England. We found that King Richard was indeed a hunchback as portrayed in the Shakespearean play Richard III. We found that the king died a violent death with 2 wounds to the body and 8 in the skull. The body may have been mistreated, as we have found several humiliation wounds matching historical records.
Dr. Todd Gray is the Chief Medical Examiner of the state of Utah. Dr. Gray recently had the opportunity to examine the skull of King Tut at Primary Children's Hospital. After the examination, Dr. Gray ruled that King Tut did not die of natural causes, but he was murdered after Gray found a blow to the back of the skull. This is a great example of how biohistory can change the history we think we know today.
I am a museum researcher. Another great example of how biohistory can change the way we think about historical figures today is Edgar Allan Poe. One night, Poe stumbled into a gutter and died of what was thought to be alcohol poisoning. Dr. Michael Benitez did a study on Poe and found he actually died of rabies. Edgar Allan Poe was hallucinating and talking to imaginary objects. These were all side effects of the case of rabies Poe had.
I'm a sociologist, here to present to you the issues of biohistorical research. A legal issue that goes with biohistorical research is that charges can be pressed for releasing false information about people who are dead when faulty DNA tests are done. An ethical issue is that doing tests on bodies is disrupting privacy. When bodies are laid to rest, people say rest in peace. But digging them up to do tests on them, despite what they would have wanted when they were alive, is not right.
Our professional team of researchers have found a few scientific issues behind biohistorical research. Ancient DNA is extremely difficult to extract. First of all, scientists need to find sufficient material to work with once the body has decomposed. Another scientific issue is DNA contamination. Contamination is particularly difficult because problem to solve, especially in ancient peoples such as cavemen, because their genetic makeup is very similar to our genetic makeup. Lab chemicals can be contaminated by people working with them. Most extracted DNA is fragmentary and very damaged when extracted. This makes some DNA indistinguishable. However, there are ways that researchers can counteract contamination. They can isolate DNA and evaluate if contamination has occurred.
We propose that in the effort to preserve privacy, decency, and accuracy, we propose that the experts in the field of history, forensic pathology, archaeology, anthropology, and sociology come together to develop rules and guidelines so that biohistorical research can be used both ethically and responsibly.